Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Back to the TARDIS podcast. I'm Jeff.
I'm Gabby.
And I'm Asa.
And this week we are discussing Season 2, Serial 8, The Chase by Terry Nation. This is the only the third appearance of the Daleks in Doctor Who, as well as the final appearances of Ian and Barbara, and also the first appearance of their replacement Steven, but like the episode kind of ends and like they don't bring up the fact that he got onto the TARDIS until like the next episode, apparently.
I was wondering about that because I read that on the Wikipedia and I was like waiting for them to come back and be like, oh, hey, Steven, let's head off together. And it just ends.
It just ends.
To be continued.
Which I mean, to be fair, this can be applied to like the story as a whole of like this era of the show was significantly more serialized. Like episodes have individual titles and just kind of seamlessly flow into one another, even like at the beginning and end of the story. So it's not there's a bit less of a boundary between individual stories. In general, though, I'd say this story is kind of like, this is the kind of shit you could only get in the 60s of like, there is a location change, basically like a major location change, basically every single episode.
More.
Yeah.
Like they will literally like, and part of that is the key conceit of the story, but they'll literally like fuck off somewhere for 10 minutes and then like do like two things there and then move on. And there will be like cast members and shit. And it's like, the budget obviously didn't really support it, but like I respect the sheer balls of Terry Nation for being like, fuck it. New location every week.
There will be random. We will build an Abraham Lincoln set. We will have Elizabeth I before the 10th Doctor does his thing, and the Beatles. We will
be the reason why there is any surviving video footage of the Beatles on top of the Pops, because all of that shit got junked.
Really?
Yes.
Oh
That's
my
silly.
God. BBC moment.
It's also like so much. It's like, it's so campy and goofy too. Like it feels like basically every single like threat is dealt with in the silliest way possible. And like, this is the Daleks' third appearance and they're already just completely jobbing. One of them goes in dialogue.
Like I was watching this and I was just like, oh, people like make fun of the Daleks for being like total like jobbers contemporarily. And I'm just watching this and there's a sequence where they're trying to stop a Dalek, and so they just run around saying yoo-hoo and chase him and like bait him into falling into a hole, and this works. Yeah. Like they're just dodging Dalek bullets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like I feel like in classic, like every 10 years or so, they kind of had to do a story to like reset and be like, oh no, don't forget guys, these guys are actually like serious and really scary and dangerous. Like we had that with Genesis. I feel like they tried to do it a couple times in the 80s, but in the interim, it's just complete goofy central.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many parallels between or at least I felt like there were a lot of parallels between this and like so much of like the campy, goofy original series of Star Trek, just because sometimes the Klingons are like racist, like Cold War allegory stuff, and other times it's like slapstick hijinks where we're like chasing each other around. And yeah, that you just have to like do periodic stories where you reset
Sometimes
it.
you get tribbles.
Yeah, and we see it even today because like we had Dalek in series 1 of the revival, and then I don't know, I don't like the 13th Doctor a lot. I like her more than some other people, but like the first Dalek episode she had, that was really terrifying and spooky. So it's fun to see all the patterns start where it's just like, okay,
Yeah.
now all the way back here, third story, already a joke. It was very funny.
Yeah. It's like they managed to get everything too, because like so I will say, like, this episode has some issues. I think the middle is the best because that's when they're just fully going into the bit of just like running around and just wacky shit happening. I think the first like chunk where they're on that like desert planet and the last bit don't really do much, but that middle bit is great. But it is really funny how you have like that desert planet shit with the fish people is such like classical pulp sci-fi. Like it feels so like 60s Trek, or the kind of shit that George Lucas was watching that inspired him to make the fucking Star Wars. And then they like make a detour to the fucking Mary Celeste for a few minutes just to be like, hey, here's one explanation for what happened there, even though apparently Doctor Who, in the Doctor Who canon, there have been like 5 or 6 different explanations for what the hell happened with the Mary Celeste.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Why not?
Yeah, there's a broke canon video on it. I'll have to see if I can find it and link to it in the show notes. Then they fucking go to the Empire State Building and deal with like the shittiest American accents you've ever heard. And Peter Purvis is already there too. Like he shows up at the end as Steven, but like the guy from Alabama is Steven's actor.
Yeah, I saw that on the Wikipedia and I was just like, oh, this guy is not American. Like the accents are so funny, like because the New York accent is just like so atrocious. I'm like, what is this supposed to be? Like, is this supposed to be Italian? Is this Polish? And then it cuts to the like southern accent guy, and he's like supposed to be from Alabama, and he has on a cowboy hat, and he keeps slipping between like 3 different southern accents, and like none of them are coherent, and like half the time it just sounds like he's having a stroke.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Not to mention the fact that literally the entire like first half of the first episode is like just them fucking around in the TARDIS with the time-space visualizer.
Yeah, like that was so funny. I was like, is this gonna be the entire first episode?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it it feels like it because it really feels like the second episode stuff with the desert planet just kind of bleeds over to the latter half of the first episode.
Pretty much, yeah. I was gonna say the desert planet thing. It, for some reason, it feels like a Homestuck planet. Like,
I guess, yeah.
No, hear me out here. Hear me out. You know, you got like the local residents are hapless, and like some ecological disaster has happened to the planet, and our heroes show up, and they're like, the locals are flailing, and there's something living deep below the surface that they need to go reckon with. Yeah, so it is like very pulpy sci-fi, but also Homestuck.
Yeah. I will also say too, with the time-space visualizer stuff where they show the clip of the Beatles performing Ticket to Ride, this is actually one of the rare times where them doing the pull of like Vicky referring to the Beatles as classical music actually works, because we do still give a shit about the Beatles 50 years later.
I was gonna say, like, I think I literally said something that, oh my god, Doctor Who has always been like this in like doing contemporary things, and this is exactly the same as the Doctor dabbing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty much,
It probably has more shelf life than the than the Britney Spears reference.
I was also thinking of the bit in, I don't know which of the Abrams Star Trek movies it is, but it's the bit where Kirk plays Sabotage by the Beastie Boys and refers to it as like classical. And I'm like, I love the Beastie Boys, but nobody 200 years from now is going to give a shit about the Beastie Boys.
Okay, to be fair, that hasn't aged as poorly as the Discovery Elon Musk moment.
That's true. That's true.
It's okay. Stacey Abrams is the president. It's fine.
What?
Do you not know this?
No.
Yes, there's a
Is
bit.
that also in Disco?
It is in Discovery, yes. Stacey Abrams was the space president.
Of Earth.
Oh my god. Jesus Christ. Oh, I don't know if that's better or worse than the Elon Musk thing, honestly. I literally don't know. Oh, okay. Yeah, like the fish people thing is, so I will also say I feel a bit more positive on this story than I think maybe some other people in this call, but I also specifically I split it up over multiple days. I watched like the first 2 episodes on Wednesday, like the first episode on Wednesday, 2 yesterday, and 3 today.
Yeah.
So I didn't shotgun it all at once.
I wish I had done that. I would have if I had known. I didn't look beforehand and didn't realize it was 6 episodes. And so I just watched this all in, I mean, it was 2 sittings, but there was only about 40 minutes between that when I went to get dinner. So
yeah,
I did pretty much watch it straight, and I felt like I was pulling my hair out by the end.
Mm-hmm. I think it's part of the format, because if I'm not mistaken, no way did they or should they release something like this all at once.
No, it would be like 1 or 2 a week.
Yeah, so it makes more sense like spread out like that, but unlike today where we're doing like 2-parters, or maybe like the rare 3 with like the Sound of Drum stuff, or like Face the Raven. Yeah, this is a lot.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling I'm gonna be one of the only ones of us to remember it because it's so silly, and maybe like the general plot. Cause yeah, it just this episode kind of just happens, and it keeps happening, and not in a bad way, but yeah.
Yeah, it is really. So I think there's a couple things that are definitely great about this. Is that so? While it is like possibly the most and then episode that we've ever watched, I do think some of those and then digressions are pretty entertaining, as I said in the middle half. And I think it is very indicative of like the vibe of the show at the time. Yeah. And like kind of what the dynamics are, where you have, it's like at this point, one has like, he's still prickly, but he's not as like outright misanthropic as he was like very early on. So he's kind of this almost like pricklier Doc Brown type, where he's just kind of like, they're running away from the Daleks and have a limited lead compared to the Daleks, but they're always popping out and looking around just because he's curious. He wants to see, he wants to know what the hell, like what's going on. And he has like, I think he literally goes like, ooh hoo 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 at one point. Like he's literally like just a silly guy, you know, like a goofy, silly guy. And then you have like Ian and Barbara as like the more normal ones, and like Ian as like, he can be the more physical guy because obviously William Hartnell is not very physical at all. And Barbara as like the person who has like historical knowledge because she's the history teacher and can kind of intermediate between people. And then Vicky as the replacement granddaughter / enabler for one. Like, I feel like a lot of times like she like, so this was also partly like this part of the characterization was mentioned by someone in our Discord, but also I do kind of get that vibe a bit too, where like Susan maybe not as much, but Vicky will absolutely just enable one's like goofy gremlin antics.
I just want more companions from the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vicky is neat. Even if they were like more like, you know, around for like a third of a season, or like not like the primary thing, I just think that would be neat. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Like there's this lovely like, as much as I didn't particularly vibe with like the opening and outro parts of the episode, there definitely is something to the vibe of like they pop up on this random planet and just kind of poke around, and it has this exploratory and like almost like sightseeing holiday vibe that I don't feel like alien planet exploration has later on in the series.
Yeah.
It like almost starts out kind of like not exactly slice of lifey, but like you get the idea that like this is just like a day for them, and then it turns
Yeah.
into like an adventure that the viewer is used to watching.
Yeah. And it plays that angle up to a lot. I think it loops back around to I'm jumping around, but I feel like we're probably not giving this one a serious in-depth plot summary because of how all over the place it is. But to jump forward to the end where Ian and Barbara leave, like this is it is kind of a consistent character trait of the Doctor, but like it is interesting seeing this early version of the Doctor and seeing him like literally not get why anyone wouldn't want to just bum around the universe forever just seeing what's there. Like he doesn't get why Ian and Barbara really want to go home deep down.
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic. I feel like it's kind of gratifying because I've like watched the first episode and it's just really interesting to see how it ends off. So like I kind of have a question because I know they mentioned at some point that like the time mechanism was broken or some reason. Is that just like the conceit they had at this point in the show that they couldn't go back to the same point ever?
That, and I mean also like it's pretty consistently been that the Doctor's like really bad at piloting the TARDIS.
That's pretty funny.
Like yeah, like I think there's also I think another element too with one specifically where it feels like there's probably some aspect to the character as well where like he doesn't want to let them go almost.
Yeah.
Like he likes having them around, which I think that is like that's not partly true, I think both in and out of universe. Like I think I read somewhere that like William Hartnell wasn't particularly happy with the two of them leaving either.
Huh.
And I mean, like, obviously he only stuck around for the one more season after this, but I think there definitely is something to the fact of like you had him and Ian and Barbara and Susan, and then Susan left and you could get Vicky, who like, even if the character isn't literally Susan again, she takes the same role. And then Ian and Barbara leave and Steven comes in, and then both of them leave, like, I think for another pair right before he regenerates. And it's kind of like, I think, part of this may be just my read of things based on how like adventure and time and space like dramatize that. But I think to some extent too, like there is kind of a sense of like, his initial TARDIS team is his definitive TARDIS team, I think. In all respects.
Yeah. The more I see of one, the more I don't like entirely get some of the like more, I don't know, sexisty like
the shit that Moffat pulled, yeah.
Yeah, in I think it's Twice Upon
a Time.
Yeah. I mean it's still like an interesting like look, but this episode, even if very silly, definitely made me like one more. And yeah, I was kind of noticing that because at first I thought this was like the team that he has until like the end of his time, but then like they don't look like Ben and Polly, I think their names
Yeah,
are. They
Ben and
don't look
Polly,
like them at
yes.
all. um
Yeah.
so
Yeah. No, it's I think so. I've heard some comment that in Twice Upon a Time, some of that aspect of one is less about one and more of just representing like tone and attitudes of the time, because the whole episode is about change and looking back and realizing how far you've come. But I definitely agree that it kind of gives one the short end of the stick too, which kind of sucks. Like, I think David Bradley does a pretty good job as one, and like he gets some of the vibes right, but I do think there is like a sort of there is an impishness, like whimsical nature to one that I don't think David Bradley quite has got. Maybe he could do, but he hasn't really gotten to do it in any of his on-screen appearances in the same way.
Kind of what I see in that depiction of one is this real seriousness, this like trying to capture an elderly maturity, and I really think that's not there with
Yeah.
one is the interesting thing. I feel like he's very immature. Like he acts very
He's the
immaturely.
Time-Lord teenager.
Yeah. He's a Time Lord teenager and he acts immature and he's like literally not always on top of things. Like half the times it's the other two who like come up with the solution and he's just like, "Oh, yeah, it's very smart." I can't do his accent
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
at best he like tries to kind of like almost the reverse of like maybe 11, where he's like trying to act like the older, like put it together, but inside he's like actually just kind of like a rebellious kid,
Yeah.
which is funky. But yeah, he's good. I like the I like the performance. And
Yeah.
has this doesn't matter to anything, but has he met the toy maker yet? I forget what team that's with.
I think
I believe so.
I think it's with Vicky. Hold on. Celestial Toymaker.
I'm pretty sure it's an early because this is like right towards the end of season 2 and I'm pretty sure it's a season 2 episode.
No, it's next year.
Huh.
He meets No, he meets Celestial Toymaker after Vicky's already left.
Damn.
Funky.
Yeah.
Dodo.
No, I think I get where you were going with that though, based on like the comment about the toy maker and how the toy maker like relates to the Doctor's own history in The Giggle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I'll also say another note that I had too of like the first Doctor's portrayal in Twice Upon a Time is I don't know what he's like in the 5 Doctors, but I know in the 3 Doctors, being the more stern, older, serious person is kind of what he got shoehorned into being in 3 Doctors. So I think part of that might also just be running with other characterization post his tenure, not just that entirely being on Moffat.
Mm-hmm. And then I don't know if Power of the Doctor. I don't know if he has time to do anything other than what he did in his past thing.
He's barely there, so it's not really enough to like really tell.
He redeems his comedic misogyny by telling 13 that she's like more like one of the more determined. I think that's like his big moment.
Yeah. But yes, I'd like to bring up and salute these jobber Daleks. There's the one that literally goes in the middle of their lines. which is great.
Okay, one thing I really noted is like how many times they keep obviously flubbed lines in.
Yes. that's general, like that's just the general way that the show was back then. Like they basically shot that shit live because editing was super expensive, so they tried to avoid having to do retakes whenever possible.
Like there's one part where Charles, the guy, like very clearly just like totally fucks up his line and says something entirely incoherent and like trips over his words a bunch, and then they just keep going, and it was really funny to me. Like he barely got any of his words out.
It's very good and silly.
Yeah, I will say, given that one of the infamous things about the first Doctor was William Hartnell's tendency to flub lines, he actually stays pretty on it this time.
Yeah.
So, but that was also, this was before his health had really started declining, which I think didn't help things, so. I'd also like to shout out, so I'd seen that shot of the Dalek falling off the fucking Mary Celeste before, and this entire time I thought something pushed it. I didn't know it just accidentally drove off the fucking boat. That got possibly the loudest laugh out of me in the entire episode.
I think the best meme would be like in like intercut the Ninth Doctor saying the Daleks are a genius, they can do da-da-da-da-da in like no time, and then just like plonk.
Yeah, just it falling off. And especially like, so I was just like yelling at my screen when fucking Dracula showed up. I do think it was a pretty nice like little cheeky thing to be like, oh, it's actually a future theme park. But it also makes those Daleks even more jobbers because they couldn't take out fucking robots with their laser beams. Like, they weren't bothered at all. Like, the Frankenstein guy just picks one up and tosses it.
Like, there's so many interesting implications here. Like, one, I love that the Doctor is totally wrong and there he's just like, yes, this must be a dimension of the human subconscious of nightmares, and it's like a haunted house. That's such a funny bit. Yeah. And then like second, that I guess the Dalek lasers only work on biological material because they didn't work on robots. Yeah. And third, that a random like county haunted house attraction would have fully autonomous robots that apparently have combat abilities.
By the 90s.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, there definitely is an element to this episode of like, because they hadn't like gone down the route of the Doctor of this very worldly traveler who like knew shit. The Doctor just doesn't know shit and is wrong a lot of the time. Like, just has no fucking clue. And the other thing, too, that was mentioned, this was also brought up by someone in the Discord server, of the fact that, like, because internal mechanics for the series hadn't really been figured out yet, there's a lot of silly shit, like, the Daleks' time machine is just bigger on the inside, I guess just because the Doctor's is, and Terry Nation was like, well, I guess that means all time machines are bigger on the inside.
They have time machines that are bigger on the inside, but they can't use the stairs and might accidentally fall off a ship.
Yeah.
It's very good.
To be fair, so might the Doctor.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, I did notice, like, I don't know if this was intentional, but I feel like the Dalek ship also kind of is reminiscent of, like, the prison arc. Like, it looks kind of, it has similar design cues to the prison arc that, like, the huge Dalek fleet is locked in the Series 2 finale. And I don't know if that was intentional, but I noticed it and was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah. I gotta see if I can find anything else to talk about.
It's a hard.
I think there is more. I just need to like look through and find it.
It's a somewhat difficult story to talk about because it really is just and then.
I would like to say, however, though, that this avoids one of the biggest Terry Nation tropes, which is Terry Nation was infamous for, like, pretty much after this point, they'd be like, Terry Nation, creator of the Daleks and owner of the IP of the Daleks, can you write us a new Dalek story, please? And he goes, okay, and sends in some shit that is something he's already written, but with the names changed. He kept doing it. Like, the only reason we got Genesis was because Robert Holmes, the script editor at the time, told him to fuck off and come back with something new, please.
So are the next several Dalek stories all just like the first 3 repeated?
So the next one, or at least I think it's the next one, is the Daleks Master Plan, which it has the same idea of a different location every week, but that one goes on for 12 episodes.
Oh my god.
Dalek Demon Pit.
There's also apparently like at least 1 or 2 that are like the initial Dalek story, like again, just with the names changed. I know the last script that he did for Doctor Who that was like Daleks was it was the one it's the story that was right before City of Death, and apparently it's not good either. But what happened is I think he did the same thing again, but this time like mixed some Genesis elements into it, and Douglas Adams, who was the script editor at the time, just like gave up and like took the thing and wrote some stuff into it of like taking the piss of it, but it's still like a pretty crap episode because it's just nothing. So shout outs to Terry Nation. You did actually come up with something original here and submit it. Even if I think you went a little bit too hard and maybe he burned up all his height. Maybe he burned up 90% of his ideas for the Daleks in this episode. Given how much shit happens in it. Yeah, I will also say, so yeah, I think Ian and Barbara's goodbye is really well handled, as I mentioned. I think it's very fun. Like, it's so weird and funny that, like, it cuts to them and they get back to Earth, and it, like, cuts to, like, a 1.5 minute long montage of still photos of them, like, celebrating and running about London, being like, we're back, and it's like, you didn't even, like, film this? You're just putting, like, still photographs up? Like, did you just completely run out of money?
It's a little charming.
Yeah, no, it is very charming, yeah. And yeah, I do think that the final bit too of revealing that one and Vicky are watching them on the time space visualizer, and one's like, yeah, I'll miss them. All right, moving on, I guess. That's really good. That's honestly, so like, okay, my delivery actually really undersold that because I think it's a lot more poignant than I actually said that. I think that's one of the better like companion departures I've seen for classic.
Definitely.
Especially considering the one before it would have been Susan's departure, where he basically kicks her out of the TARDIS and like leaves her on future Earth. It's kind of fucked up, actually.
I shall come back and doesn't come back.
Yeah, like he just kind of ditches her. And then next week maybe feels bad about it, so he just gets a replacement granddaughter. It's kind of fucked up.
My emotional support granddaughter.
Pretty much, actually, considering like that's kind of the role that the young female companions had in one's run. That's kind of the vibe. But yeah, I guess I know this is a shorter one, but if nobody else has anything else to mention, I think that's about all I have to mention. Because it's a lot of things. It was a fun experience, but it's probably not one that I'd revisit a bunch, even if I like respect its guts.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right.
I think I'm good too.
Yeah. Okay. Then yeah, moving on to ratings. As I said, it's kind of similar to last week where like I respect the sheer like ambition, I guess. Like, I respect what they were going for, and I really enjoy some of the mid bits where it's very goofy, but it kind of has the inverse problem to last week's, where like when viewed as a story and not, I think, in its the format it was intended to be viewed in, as like a week to week serial where each week the Doctor and his friends get into wacky shenanigans in a crazy new location each week. I think when you watch it removed from that context, it kind of loses a lot and feels a lot clunkier. That being said, again, I appreciate them going for all these swings on a BBC budget in the 60s when the show was being basically shot completely live and basically almost everything was on sound stages. Like, yeah, man, you really went for it, and I appreciate the fuck out of it, even if I think this is only like a B minus. Also, thank you for not turning in like a repeat script and coming up with something new.
Yeah, kind of like Jeff said, I think it's very respectable, and it's very like interesting from a production and like history of like television and sci-fi television, like as a format, seeing how that was being done, just the amount of stuff that they were able, even if it's like a and then thing, still manages to be funny and have memorable moments and even some good character stuff, even if like pacing and stuff as like one cohesive thing is like very funky, it's not good. But just like the miniature work, all the set transitions, the like bothering to do like extra details for like basically an intro gag with like the time travel TV thing.
They got the fucking Beatles.
Yeah.
In 1965.
It's very cool and impressive, but that's more of like an appreciation of like how it exists than like actual entertainment value. But it did make me laugh, which is good. And seeing how much work and effort was put into like the script and like producing it all, seeing that they went for it. I'm not going to be mean and say that modern TV doesn't do that, but when I look at something like this and then I see like some shows by a very specific network with the mascot of a mouse overusing like the volume and stuff like that and making everything seem so like fake, like obviously a lot of this stuff is fake, but it like, I don't know, there's a charm in production and care that's just, it's great.
It's like, yes, Kamen Rider special effects that aren't like practical tend to look like shit, but also I respect them for going for it, even if like this shit looks like an unshaded PS1 model that you just plopped into this shot with like no attempt to make the lighting match whatsoever.
Yeah, so
there's soul in that.
I'd say like, I don't know, like C+ for entertainment value, and then like, I don't know, like a B+ for like effort. So I'm just gonna like split the difference and say B-. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like this episode. Or like, okay, no, I appreciate this episode is what I should say. I really agree that it's like a window into a different time of TV. It really felt like reading a sci-fi serial, and I was just like, wow, things sure are happening. Like, I get it. It's really interesting because when you think about how you would watch this, it would be like, okay, they set up that the Daleks are chasing you, and it's just kind of like a week to week. The Doctor shows up in a place, and the place is kind of interesting, and then there's a funny twist at the end, and they move on to the next place. I will say parts of it are like downright incoherent. I would say like the desert planet and Mech Anus are like incoherent settings.
Yeah.
And what happens there is also mostly incoherent, but it's okay. Ultimately, I think it's a good vibe for a story, but it really does not land it, and it's very 60s and very, oh my god, this is classic Who. And the Daleks
Yeah.
are just like there. Overall, I would call it like a 6 out of 10 story.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I will say there is another 60s six-parter on this wheel. However, if I remember correctly, because I have actually seen this one, it is more interesting and like goes into more like surreal territory and maybe feels like it's got kind of the weirdness and the wonder of the 60s stuff, but done better. But who knows if we'll actually get that, because it's all up to fate. Actually, hold on. I have to take someone off real quick. I don't want to deal with the Eighth Doctor right now, even though I lowered the percentage chance. There we go. Okay. So we have to once again submit ourselves to fate and see where fate takes us. It may land us. We may finally get to watch that Third Doctor episode we've wanted to watch for like 2 months, or we may fall into the Chibnall Demon Pit.
No.
Spooky.
Only fate will tell. Let's see.
Yes.
Yay!
Yes. 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 Yes.
Yay.
Finally, it took us like 2 months, but we finally get to watch the Third Doctor's first televised story, Spearhead from Space. I have seen this one. It's one of the better looking classic Who episodes because it was entirely shot on film. Hell yeah. Okay, cool. Until then, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at B2TARDISPod. And I'm Geoff. You can follow me on Twitter at WheatleyDL.
I'm Gabby. You can follow us on Twitter, Aurora Borealis, but we're taking a break, so it's probably not going to be entertaining for like a couple months.
Very fair. Very fair.
I'm Asa. You can follow us on Twitter at AGPenis.
And we will see you all next time.